There's a generation that learned to be alone before they learned to ask for help. They came home to empty houses. No texts, no notifications, no one checking in. The door clicked shut behind them, and the house was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind of silence that teaches you something. They didn't call it independence back then. They called it normal. This is the psychology of Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980, often described as the forgotten generation. But psychologically, they may be one of the most self-reliant generations alive. Imagine it's 1978. You're 10 years old. You walk home from school alone. No GPS, no phone, no updates sent to your parents. You let yourself in. You make a sandwich. You turn on the television. You start your homework. If something feels heavy, you sit with it, because no one is there to process it with you. That repetition shapes a nervous system. When a child learns early that no one is coming, they stop expecting rescue. That creates independence, but it also creates emotional self-containment. Gen X didn't grow up with emotional supervision. They grew up with emotional self-management. They learned to solve boredom, to solve fear, to solve confusion alone. And when you practice that long enough, it becomes personality. That's why Gen X often appears reserved, not cold, contained. They don't overshare. They don't narrate every emotion. They don't post every internal shift. Because they were wired before validation culture existed, before likes, before stories, before audiences. Their identity was formed offline, in bedrooms, in garages, in long quiet afternoons. So they don't need constant reflection from others to know who they are. They process internally and move forward. Gen X is also described as cynical. But cynicism, psychologically, is often protective realism. They watched divorce rates rise. They saw economic instability. They experienced corporate downsizing. They grew up during political distrust. Institutions failed. Promises shifted. Stability felt temporary. So they learned something powerful. Don't depend too much on systems, on corporations, on guarantees. Trust competence instead. Trust yourself. That skepticism isn't negativity. It's pattern recognition. And it makes them adaptable. When the world changes, they don't panic. They adjust. They've done it before. They moved from analog childhood to digital adulthood. They remember rotary phones, cassette tapes, waiting days for information. And then suddenly, the internet, email, smartphones, social media. They didn't grow up inside technology. They watched it arrive. So they relate to it differently. They use it, but they don't depend on it for identity. That's a psychological difference. At work, Gen X often appears steady. They don't perform ambition loudly. They don't brand themselves constantly. They learned early that survival meant competence, so they build skills, quietly. They endured recessions, career shifts, rapid industry changes. They adapt. But here's the paradox. When independence becomes identity, asking for help feels unnatural. Gen X often handles stress alone. They don't complain easily. They don't dramatize exhaustion. And sometimes, they burn out silently. Because strength, when internalized, turns into pressure. They became the reliable one, the stable one, the one who figures it out. But reliability has weight, and not everyone sees it. Gen X stands between generations, boomers before them, millennials and Gen Z after them. They are the bridge. They understand structured childhoods and hyper-connected ones. They understand privacy and exposure. They understand slowness and speed. That dual awareness creates psychological flexibility. They can detach when needed, engage when necessary, adapt without announcing it. They aren't loud about resilience. They don't advertise it, but it's there. Underneath the quiet, Gen X isn't emotionally empty. They're emotionally regulated. They're not detached. They're selective. They don't chase attention because they grew up without expecting it. And when validation isn't your baseline, you don't depend on it. In a world that rewards noise, they remain steady, not because they lack feeling, but because they learn to contain it. They learn to survive without applause, and that leaves a mark. Generation X may not dominate headlines. They may not trend. They may not constantly explain themselves, but psychologically, they were shaped by space. Space to struggle, space to think, space to figure things out alone. And that space created a generation that doesn't panic easily, doesn't overshare easily, doesn't collapse easily. Quiet, resilient, self-contained. That's the psychology of Generation X.